Hello, everyone, and welcome to these special elections town hall put together by Channels Television in conjunction with the Civil Society Situation Room with support from UK Aid. Consistent elections and peaceful transition of power are a sign of a developing democracy. Nigeria has seen tough, rough, bad, ugly, fair, and good elections. But over the past years, there have been considerable improvements in the electoral process. The consciousness seems to have improved, although things are still far from where we envisaged it should be. In fact, there is so much work to be done, but it is obvious that we are a nation in obvious awareness of what should be done, but it appears we find ourselves far from the dreamland. Tonight, in this 2-hour telecast, we seek to begin a conversation that hopes to help inspire Nigeria to not to only help our dream of the best place to be, but to actually be where it is meant to be in terms of elections and democratic practice. The conversation are in two folds. First, we critically analyze the work done on the Electoral Act Amendment Bill as we anticipate President Muhammadu Buhari's assent. On the other hour, we assess the bimodal accreditation system utilized in past elections, particularly at the Anambra governorship election held on the 6th of November 2021. The question is, did the BVAS work? What are the successes, the flaws, and the lessons for future elections? And we hope to get varied opinions and aggregate them to help improve our elections. Welcome, everyone. I'm Sean Kimbaloye, your host for this town hall. On the 9th of November 2021, the National Assembly passed the final draft of the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, and it has since been transmitted to President Buhari for his assent about 3 or 4 days ago. On the passage of the bill, well, there seems to be a lot to talk about on that, especially some of the critical clauses that emerge from the conversation in the floor of the National Assembly, on the debate and the public domain, and of course, eventual passage. Well, it went back for the harmonization, and they took it back to the floor. At the end of the day, we have a draft that has been sent to the president that was now being waiting, that is waiting for assent. So some of the clauses that we need to take a closer look at for this conversation. Some of them include the issue of the mode of primaries, the issue of what INEC needs to do when it comes to the critical point of electronic transmission of result. Can INEC now be guaranteed in the Electoral Act of the use of the BVAS and any other means that it deems necessary? These are some of the issues that have been captured in some of these new clauses. 5 of them we might be taking a closer look tonight for you. So much. The nation eagerly anticipates the assent of President Buhari on the Electoral Act Amendment, as there are feelings that some of the adjustments made were far-reaching, and they will have far-reaching effect on our future elections. Let's take a look at some of the controversial or the critical clauses in the bill. We've shown you a few of them earlier on. I told you that some parts of it will include the use of technology for this election, the mode of primary. But let's get into the conversation proper, and let's not delay any further. I have joining us tonight. We expected the chairman of Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, but we understand that for some reason he may not be able to join us, but he's ably and effectively represented tonight by the National Commissioner in charge of voter education and publicity, Mr. Festus. Okay, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And also we have the convener of the Election Situation Room, Ms. NLB. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thank you for having me.
It's good to see you again.
Thank you.
And a constitutional lawyer, rights activist, Mr. Clement Nwankwo. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's begin the conversation on the Electoral Act Amendment. And I'll probably put Mr. Nwankwo right on the spot, because I know you took active role in ensuring, and I mean, you work closely on those bills. Is that that draft? Was that what you envisage eventually when the harmonization came?
Well, I worked closely with Festus as well, so but certainly I think that the National Assembly had to do a lot of debate on several of the proposals that were made. We know that there were clauses that civil society advocated, but at the end of the day, I think that there were considered provisions, and the National Assembly debated and discussed extensively before reaching the conclusion. So what we can say right now is that the National Assembly has taken a decision, and all we can do at this time, they've transmitted it to the president, and I think the expectation now is that the president signs it. And certainly, if there are reservations by anyone, whether even us who follow through with the process or other civil society organizations or INEC or some governors we have had have their views. If there are any conversations around concerns, and I think we did have the experience with the Petroleum Industry Act where those who had some concerns were able to succeed in bringing back for amendments. So at this stage, I think the conversation is really more about the president's assent to the bill, and we're all looking forward to the president assenting to the bill.
Mr. Okoye, the bill, when it's passed, is going to be your tool, your baby, because that is the critical law that helps you execute the election. For INEC, what do you think is perhaps one major thing that will help improve your elections in the elections from what has been amended so far?
Well, you know, as of today, the bill is still inchoate until the president gives his assent. But we must also recognize the fact that the legislative powers of the Federation resides with the National Assembly. And what other critical stakeholders can only do is to make suggestions, make proposals, and also make input. But at the end of the day, it is the responsibility of the National Assembly to make laws for the Federation and other parts of the Federation. Now, if you look at the present section 49 of the Electoral Act relating to the issue of how elections are conducted and how votings take place, you will see that prior to this particular period, we were using the smart card reader as a means of accreditation. But you know, some lawyers went to court and tried to use the data from the smart card as a means of proving overvoting. And the Supreme Court said, no, you cannot use the data from the smart card reader for purposes of proving overvoting because that the provisions of Section 49 of the Electoral Act did not envisage the smart card reader as the dominant tool for proving overvoting. So what the National Assembly has done this time around is to impute the issue of electronic accreditation into the electoral process so that data from the smart card reader or from the BVAS can be used as a means of proving overvoting and also as a means of accreditation. So I think that that is also very, very fundamental. And then the National Assembly has also fundamentally domiciled the issue of electronic machines as a means of conducting elections, and also the issue of electronic transmission of election results. So I think that if you look at the bill critically and comprehensively, you will see that there are quite a lot of progressive provisions. Our view is that some of these things are incremental, and we cannot get everything we ask for in one fell swoop. So as we progress, I believe that if there are loopholes, if there are lacunae, if there are challenges with the implementation of the bill, if the president assents to it, the Independent National Electoral Commission can still go back to the agency of government or to the organ of government vested with the power of amending the laws or the power of altering any provision of the law, and then get it to do the needful.
Well, I wanted to get initial general view about it before we go into specifics. And of course, we know that we have a very distinguished studio audience here, some of which will be really participating in the exercise. Thank you so much gentlemen and lady, for coming tonight. Ms. Obi, because I know you lead several groups of civil society. When INEC gets it right, you speak about it. When they don't get it right, you speak about it. Yeah. Generally speaking, if you have had your time to look into what has been drafted and sent to the president, are you satisfied? Does it look like a dream law that will help our election?
I will not say a dream law, but I think because we have been involved in all of the processes, and that's why when one of the lines, the major lines on electronic transmission was going to be thrown off, we all shouted, and we called on the parliament to immediately amend that and go back to it. And the result is the reactions that we have gotten from the parliament is positive reactions in terms of what the Senate came out with, and then what the House of Representatives came out with. They went into conference, and I think they have done well. At least the fast transmission. This time we are not having a missing link. The fast transmission of what they have agreed to the president. I think we are satisfied with where we are so far, and we hope that the president will quickly assent to the bill so that it becomes an act, and then we can hit the ground running.
Let's look in details now. We go to specifics, and of course, I'll get to the audience so that we can have feedback. The details and the specifics will help us to analyze better. Let's talk about the new and the adjusted clauses, the ballot boxes and voting devices. In clause 43, as it was amended, the old clause states that the commission shall provide suitable boxes or any other voting device for the conduct of elections. But the new clause now states that the commission shall provide suitable boxes, electronic voting machine, or any other voting device for the conduct of elections. The question is INEC ready for, should this law, this particular one be passed, electronic voting machine? I mean, for a lot of people who may be mixing it, electronic voting and transmission are two different things. But is INEC ready for such a moment when we go into voting, electronic voting?
Exactly. You see, this commission has been very, very proactive in terms of its response to major electoral issues and also its response to technological developments across the world. The commission views the whole issue of electronic voting from 4 perspectives. The first is that we already have an electronic voters register, which we've been using. The second is that we already have electronic authentication of voters in terms of accreditation. Now, we don't have, as of today, electronic voting machines in the electoral process, but we also have electronic transmission of results. So the missing link in all this is the electronic voting machines. Now, if the law is passed, the commission will be ready to make the necessary adjustments and also to make the necessary input in terms of the type of electronic voting device we need. As you are aware, the commission some months ago invited 49 companies who came and demonstrated the type of electronic voting solutions they have. And from that particular demonstration, we've already made a determination of the type that is ruggedized, the type that we suit our environment, and also the type that we have a paper trail, so that at the end of the day, we can have a trajectory on how to domicile the vote of each voter within the electoral matrix. So if the bill is passed and the president, if the president assents to the bill and it becomes law, the commission will be ready to deploy all the necessary electronic solutions that have been proposed in the bill.
Because the language of this particular clause says shall be entitled. That means, although Mr. Okoye is a lawyer, but let me allow Mr. Nwanko. It then means that it's a must for INEC to conduct elections by electronic voting, isn't it?
No, again, the provisions, if you look at the new clause 51, and when it signed it, then referred to as section, but the new clause 51, which is the previous controversial clause 52, talks about INEC having the powers to determine how to conduct elections. Now, that clause, although it subjects it to Section 63, but in reality, that clause gives INEC enormous powers. It gives it powers to determine how the elections should be conducted. INEC is already at the stage. I think INEC is actually way ahead, and we must commend INEC for educating the public and providing information to the National Assembly about the progress that it has made in preparing and conducting elections. And that's why when Festus is talking about talking to vendors, talking about machine producers, talking about its experience with engaging experts, I think INEC has gone way, way ahead. And it's going to be, I think, a concern in the near future or in the medium future will be more about the quality of INEC than about the law. Because the law now gives so much powers to the Independent National Electoral Commission. And this commission, as we have it today, is thinking way ahead. And I would use the word is even progressive. We must then be concerned looking past this commission, or as we keep an eye on this commission, how it manages the powers that is given to it under the law. And I think that for us in civil society, the political parties, that's what to look out for. Is INEC keeping faith with the law, keeping faith with what it says, because INEC says a lot of things.
But because we'll soon get to that point. I know the likes of Senator Victor Omer is in the audience. We have former Minister Osita Chidoka, those who firsthand experience some of these issues in Anambra, which we'll get to that point. But, Ms. Obi, the issue of electronic voting, if you look at it, it's not something that has not been experienced in Nigeria. Kaduna State, for the second time, had conducted a similar, local government election using electronic machine. It's not going to be novel for INEC to do because we've seen a state electoral commission do it. But in your own view, if you look at the Kaduna experience, is that the way to go?
I think even when Kaduna state government was doing it, INEC was still present, in terms of looking at the formation of what's on ground. And INEC has gone on ahead they organized the Isoko South election. They also were just coming back from Anambra State. And so it's not, it's a way to go. The world is gone high-tech.
But the question I'm asking is, you were in Anambra State.
Yes.
It's not enough for you to have a law that empowers you.
Yes.
It's whether or not you have the capacity.
Yes.
Because we saw some of the BVAS machine. That's one conversation that we. But since we are talking electronic, it's not enough for you to like gadgets. It's whether or not you have the mental capacity or the wherewithal to be able to operate the gadgets. As we saw what happened on the field, some of these gadgets just, or maybe the users during the elections just didn't know how to use them.
I think the BVAS, we still need a lot of education, public education, public enlightenment on the machines that we have brought to them. There is need for serious, public education. And that is why we ask INEC to collaborate with other arms as well, such as National Orientation Agency for civic education. We need more civic education with the people. And it's not enough to be entrusted. It's not enough to have the law. Transparency and accountability is a major issue because of the issues of corruption and the quality of the citizens that we're talking about. The quality of the citizen that is manning the machine, one is the capacity. The other is the commitment to be able to allow the machine to perform its work. And when we saw that, in Isoko South and also in Oka, you find out where the machines worked very well. People were excited because it's a new thing. We didn't have enough time in Anambra to do civic education because of the processes leading to the election itself. But we now have time from now to 2023. And so it's very important for a lot of people. I think INEC also need to educate people beyond just their training, the technical capacity, because a lot of people had to use their high-tech ideas to be able to correct some of the issues.
Well,
but I think they trained a lot of technical people. But we are going to hold INEC, of course, responsible. When the BVAS are not working, it's not us to correct the BVAS.
I saw how some of the very hardworking workers of INEC were running helter-skelter at, it's like you have an occasion, an event, and they told you that the food that was provided is salty. There's no water. I saw them the way they were running helter-skelter. But Mr. Wanko, one thing that I see that is happening, what a lot of people might not put their mind to, is that with this, the passage of this, if it's assented to by the president, it does look like ballot papers are going to die in our elections.
I don't think so. I think, again, it's what Kaduna State, I'll start from there. What Kaduna State did must really be very well commended, because it helped answer some questions, whether you can use electronic voting machine or not. What needs to happen, of course, is that you need to look at the way the state electoral commissions are operating and see to what extent you can integrate their system with a national one. For instance, the states don't have a voters register. They rely on INEC. Mm-hmm. And the question we must ask is, what is the integrity of the current voters register? I have my challenges, and I have continued to say that publicly, that we need to look at the quality of the national voters register. But the national voters register is supposed to be accessible to the states.
Isn't that part of the amendment?
It's part of
that INEC now needs to make, for anybody who wants to even access it, can pay for and the law states the
yes,
amendment.
But there's still the gap that it doesn't say how you integrate it with the state's voting system. That would have helped if you had that system clearly defined. Then you would have a well fine-tuned electronic voting as we had in Kaduna. But I think it's a good idea Kaduna introduced it. It tells you it can work. And then it means that the national system needs to integrate with the states. And that's when you would have optimum performance. But on the question whether you can eliminate the paper, the ballot paper, it's still very important. You have paper trail. And the electoral law, as we have, the new electoral bill anticipates that. And that's why it talks in section 51, even right down to section 63, section 61, 62, 63. It talks about how you should actually conduct elections. It even talks about collation of election results. So you can't really, and I would be wary about eliminating the ballot papers and the ballot trail.
And everybody, I'm very sure in your office, Mr. Nwoko, you're encouraging your staff to go paperless.
Yes.
I know it's difficult to do.
But yes, but that's look, because people are very honest.
Imagine the long list of political parties, and you cannot discourage people from organizing themselves, from coming together, the association. But the issue is that you have 60-something political parties. If all those political parties go into an election, you have a very long ballot paper. I see Mr. Okoye, when I talked about elimination of the ballot paper, you were nodding in the negative. It looks like you still love your gadget, because I see this commission as a commission of gadgets. You love gadget, but you still love your paper, isn't it?
No, I was just only listening to the conversation. The truth of the matter is that if you look at the bill as transmitted to the president, you can see that the National Assembly was very, very reluctant about eliminating completely the paper ballot. And if you also look at it, you will see that the National Assembly also made provision that at the end of voting, that the presiding officers must still enter the scores of the candidates into a result sheet that will be signed by the presiding officer and also signed by the party, the polling agents, if available. And that paper must still be transmitted to the collation center, and then that the paper that has already been signed can now be transferred electronically to the next level of the collation, as may be determined by the Independent National Electoral Commission. So it seems to me that they are looking at a duality to maintain some level of paper trail and also make a provision for electronic transfer of election results.
All right. It's time for us to get some comments that I'm seeing. Some people are talking about what they would love to see. Predominantly is a situation where we don't have to wait and keep vigil for us to, for those who are very mathematically conscious, that how is it difficult to put those figures together? We have to wait and see INEC enter those figures. And when you tell people that those forms that you see are captured in the law and they're very sacrosanct, people may not believe it, but it's the truth. But let me get 2 comments before we go on a break from our studio that I don't know. We just introduce yourself and your organization and your intervention just quickly before we take a break. Who is going first? Oh, it's Senator Ume. Yeah. No, you can stand. You can. Yeah. Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. The panelists are my brief comment is on the electronic voting that is being contemplated. When Sheyun spoke about dispensing with paper voting, ballot papers, nobody appeared to agree. Electronic voting, putting your vote through electronic means. In other words, like an ATM, when you are accredited to vote, there must be a button you will tap and all the options will come out. The parties that are contesting the election, so that you check the one you want to vote for, you click somewhere and the vote will be counted for that party. I don't know the recourse they will have to papers, again, ballot papers, if that is the case. Because if you introduce ballot paper again, then the voting is no longer electronic voting. Unless you are not talking about collation, when after voting using the electronic machine, the votes will be shown by the machine as received by the parties. Then you now copy the results in a collation sheet, which agents will sign and you move forward. But that, again, I consider the literacy level of the electorate in electronic voting. Because if you check the bimodal voter accreditation, you will see that the efficacy does not depend on the ability of the voter to participate in the voting process, but the machine itself. Once you bring your finger and the machine recognizes it, it turns green, and you give the voter ballot paper. The voter knows who the party he or she wants to vote for, goes to the cubicle and do the thumb printing, and then put in the box. It goes away. But if it comes to electronic voting, a lot depends on the knowledge, the literacy level of the voter to be able to operate the electronic voting machine, make the necessary punching accurately, and then gets away. Without anybody, because this idea of improving the electoral process is in such a manner that the voter will be able to cast his or vote unaided. If you still want to rely on somebody to tell you how to go about it, the process can be compromised.
All right.
So that's what my comment on the electronic.
Thank you so much, Senator Ume.
Thank you.
Because we need to take a break. When we come back from the break, I'd like Mr. Okoye and the panelists to weigh in on what Senator Ume raised. Senator Ume is someone who's been on the field for years when it comes to election. He's lost elections, he's won some. So, so when he speaks from experience, and that's why we have him. He's going to be on the other panel anyways. But we'll take a break. And when we come back, the conversation continues. We still check some critical parts of the amended clauses in the electoral amendment be sent to President Buhari plus that controversial point of transmission of result and the debate over direct or indirect primaries. We talk about them when we return from this break, everyone. Join us again. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us to this special elections town hall on improving our election. You've been on to this election this program put together by Channel Television in conjunction with the Civil Society Election Situation Room with support from UK Aid. The panelists have been speaking on several issues raised on the Amendment Act and awaiting President Muhammadu Buhari's assent. We got some reactions from the studio audience. Let's get one or two more, and we'll come back to the panelists to react to it. Please, go ahead with you.
My name is Austin Aigbe. I congratulate the panelists, very erudite scholars. There's something I'd like to bring to the fore. It's important we stress the need for the avoidance of the ballot papers. I mean, first us talked about paper trail. This is to avoid a temptation that is coming from technological savvy individuals, that there's a possibility that you could use programming to undermine electronic voting. That when you vote A, it could actually change to B. So when you have a paper trail, the voter then actually get a printout, like a POS machine, that is also called ballot. It puts that ballot out in the open. The idea is to have a tally with the electronic device. If it pops up to XYZ amount of party, you then also validate that with the paper trail. But we are not talking about a cost saving that Nigeria will save when we avoid this currency level ballot paper we are used to printing in this country. We must run away from it. Nigeria is currently borrowing for everything. We want to avoid the time we borrow to run elections. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Can you, okay, yeah, please go ahead. Okay, so let's take the lady first, please. Okay. Let's take the lady first.
Ladies, yes.
I'll fight for the ladies any day, anytime.
The lady has seen it.
Okay, go ahead. So actually, I was fighting for the lady, not knowing that she was helping her. So go ahead, Manji. I appreciate it. Go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Manji Wilson with the European Center for Electoral Support. Just to add to this conversation, I think it's important. One very key element that I see a bit missing is that for electronic voting, there are basically two systems. So you have the electronic balloting and you have the internet voting or online voting. And I think a lot of people sometimes have the presumption that the conversation is around the internet voting, but we have the National Commissioner here who I'm sure will clarify, on that clause. To date, in the whole world, I think there are just about a few countries that are implementing internet voting. Estonia, for instance, has a fully fledged, internet voting system, while a lot of other countries just deploy it, in a staggered format. For instance, for, residents living abroad, diaspora voting, for instance, or those military officials or diplomats that are not residents in the country, they have an access to either vote through the postal ballot or the internet voting system in countries like France, Panama, and a few other countries. I think it's quite important for us to understand that having a verified vote paper trail, for the election, avoids the situation we had in Kenya, for instance, or in the DRC, where the trust deficit, sort of impacted the process. Trust and electoral integrity, which is a very key element that we are still grappling with in our election process, is very, very sensitive to handle this issue, with, such a means. Thank you.
Let me take one more comment and I'll allow, there's so much to chew when we start talking about electronic voting. Please go ahead, sir.
Okay, Sean, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, good evening. Thanks that wonderful presentation. I think my comment is just around what he just said, because if it's going to be internet-based, then we'll consider the integrity of our infrastructure to support that. So I think it's something thinking along, line of setting it offline, considering the remote area and the challenges we have as a country. But despite that, Austin raised the issue of cost, which I think for me is also very, very important. Now, because if you look at the quantum of resources expended on the electoral process in Nigeria, and looking at that ballot paper, how long it is there a way, we can set a criteria of political party that goes into, number of political party that goes into that ballot paper? I think it's something we can also consider in terms of cost.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So let me get, because there are a few more clauses that I want us to treat before we move on to the next thing. Allow the panelists to weigh in. Do you want to go first, Mr. Okoye?
Yes, I think that it's important to also clarify what Manji talked about. What the Commission is considering as of today is the introduction of electronic voting machines in the electoral system, in which case electronic voting machines will be deployed to all the polling units, and every registered voter must go to the polling unit to go and use the electronic voting machine. That's what the Commission is considering. The issue of internet voting is a thing for the future. When we improve on the integrity of our electoral process, and when we rebuild trust in the electoral process, then we can begin to talk about the issue of internet voting. Now, I also believe that trust is important in our electoral process. When you have a paper trail, it is easy for you to audit what you have done. When there's no paper trail and you transmit an election result to the next level of collation, which in this instance is the registration area collation, if there's a dispute, if there's a problem, you cannot begin to go and carry the electronic, the machine itself to the collation center. So that paper trail, which we are envisaging, which is part of the big docket we are looking at in terms of introducing electronic voting machines in electoral system, is part of the audit system that we want to see. And so that the moment there's a dispute, we can use the paper trail to reconcile some of these challenges. So we are looking at these things from an incremental point of view. And as far as the Commission is concerned, we've been working on some of these things for quite some time. And if the law is passed, we won't have any difficulty whatsoever in implementing the intent of the law.
One will hope that, because there's an election year, Mr. Nwankwo, if you remember, that the INEC website was hacked on the election day. 2021, or was it 2015 or 2015? It wasn't 2019, I think it was 2011. 2019 was hacked too. I can't remember. I didn't remember that.
I don't know about that.
But there was a time. There was a time that on the election day, INEC website was hacked. And another issue is that okay, it's generating the debate there. Another issue which I like Mr. Obi and Mr. Nwankwo to weigh in on is the issue of the intent, the reasons why people snatch ballot boxes and they go after it. Because if we're not careful, we probably will be pushing ourselves into people going after these electronic machines. Because the reason, psychologically, for some people have proven, is that when people know that the result is not in the machine or in the paper, they don't have access to it, they don't move close to it because they know that the result has gone somewhere else. So it's out of the hands of the people who are operating it. But the reason why they take the ballot boxes and the paper in it and dump it into the river or scatter it is because they know it will count. So if it's not counting elsewhere or it's not stored up somewhere, that same fate might befall the machines. So allow Mr. Okoye, Mr. Nwankwo to take from that point that I just left off.
Yeah, I think that we need to, I can tell you what I think I have seen INEC do in recent elections, whether it's with ZPAD or BVAS or whatever else it intends to introduce. And
it's a commission that loves gadgets.
Yes, but the conversation around electronic voting is not new in Nigeria. In the Second Republic, and this goes to what one of the audience guests, Austin, talked about. In 1982, Professor Ayodele Awujobi of blessed memory, he was a mathematics professor at the University of Lagos, demonstrated how you could press your hand on one button and it reports on another political party. Now, that's not what I have seen INEC do. So when we talk about electronic voting and electronic voting machines, I don't think that INEC has sufficiently explained what it is doing. And I think it's something it needs to do.
Or maybe they've not figured it out yet?
No, I think they know what they're doing, but they haven't sufficiently explained to us. Because what we have seen is not electronic voting. Electronic voting is that you have a machine that has all the symbols of the parties, and people come to this machine and press the button of the party they choose. And that's where the points you make about switching of votes could happen. But I believe that from 1982, when this was first demonstrated, to now, so much has changed that could make this impossible to happen. What INEC is doing is it comes to the polling unit on voting day. It has a voters register that is captured in the machine that is used. It authenticates who the voter is. The voter is issued with a ballot paper. He votes, and it's put into a box. At the end of voting, counting is done, and those figures are entered back into that machine, BVAS now. And once it's entered, it's transmitted to cloud before it downloads into some INEC server. That's what we have seen INEC introduce in recent times. If this is not what INEC is doing or proposing to do, Festus can explain that. But bottom line is that this is what I have seen. And yet, this will continue to improve, which means we might get to the stage in the near future, in the medium term, long term, that the actual electronic voting machine, when people have had confidence in it, now appears. And that's when you can talk about symbols there and so on. As it is now, one of the contributions looked at the length of the ballot paper. And you talked about it. Now, there is nothing that says that every association that calls itself a political party should be on the ballot paper. And that's why the conversation has been on about what qualifies a political association to be on the ballot paper.
Especially for presidential elections.
It was embarrassing in 2019 when associations that had nothing to offer appeared on the ballot paper. 70-something or 80-something political parties on the ballot paper. What economy can manage that kind of expenditure?
As long as the Red Sea.
So I think that it's a constitutional reform issue. How do you get parties to be on the ballot, even if they are registered by INEC as political parties or political associations? But I think on the actual voting process itself, on the actual machine, on whether you can vote by internet or vote as a diasporan, and again, a diasporan is someone who lives just across the border from Badagry or in Sudan.
Or as far as
because
Australia.
Every time we talk about diaspora, it seems like people's eyes are focused on the UK, the US, and Europe.
All right.
But there's so many people who are Nigerians who are just walking across the road from Niger.
Let me allow Ms. Obi to come in, because quickly, and I'll take a minute from you, I'll take a minute from Mr. Okoye to respond, and I will go into the other controversial clauses about this amendment bill. And of course, we'll be anticipating what the president will do with that bill, because the controversy, the thinking of a lot of people, they are doubting whether the president will accept it is what is in the clause I want us to go to. So, Ms. Obi.
I think we're running too fast, because we're talking of electronic voting. And watching INEC over the years, they proceeded from one place to the other. So if we can step back a little bit, what we have on ground now is electronic accreditation and electronic transmission of results. And that worked, in OCA very well, because before midnight, we had almost 60-something percent, almost 4,000, results from different polling booths already transmitted, which means if you want to cheat or whatever you're doing, it's very, very difficult. And if they maintain that, if all the BVAS had worked, if the machines had worked, I think before midnight we would have had all the results. But because of the occasion we had, one of the points of Senator May is the issue of the level of education, the level of literacy. We need a lot of political education to be done. And until we do that, we cannot be talking of electronic voting at this time. The machines we have on ground now, get them working. Let the BVAS work. Because even in the supplementary election, for OCA, for Anambra State, the BVAS worked very well. We had reports from all our observers that it worked. And so everybody went, except for the late deployment of persons. And so let's go stage by stage before we knock ourselves down to say electronic voting. Let's do the one. And as we prepare for 2023, we must concentrate on political education, of the people, of civil society organizations. Before the elections, I think INEC did a lot of series of meetings with the political parties and all of the segments of society. And so I think what we need to do is to step back. INEC will progress. I think that we're even overloading the issues of the law that we're talking about. INEC has been guaranteed by the Constitution already that it can organize and conduct election as it deems fit. But we have gone back and we have been battling with the parliament and all of that. I think a stage will come when electronic voting will be possible.
All right.
But not now.
Because I need us to move into the clause relating to a contentious clause in the relation to nomination of candidate and primaries. But do you have a comment on the electronic? Because Mr. Wanko has challenged you that we really don't know what INEC.
let me just say this. Wanko understands what the issues are. What we have as of today is what I call technological convergence. Prior to this particular period, we had the DDC machine with which we did voter enrollment. Then we had the smart card reader with which we authenticated voters. Those were the things we were doing. Now, the BVAS is multifunctional. When we are engaged in voter registration, we use it for voter enrollment. During accreditation of voters, during election, we use it for the purposes of voter accreditation in terms of capturing either the fingerprint of the voter or the voter's facials. Now, after the voting process, the BVAS transforms into IREV. We use the BVAS then as IREV for the purposes of uploading polling unit level results in terms of from EC8A into a central viewing portal so that the Nigerians can see what goes on at the level of the polling unit. The only thing is that you cannot use those uploaded results for purposes of collation of results. At the level of the registration area, where the first level collation is done, what you see there are the polling unit level results from EC8A as signed by the presiding officer and also as countersigned by the poll agents. Those are the things that are required for purposes of collation. But in terms of collation, the results that we use the IREV to upload are not valid for purposes of collation of results.
Yeah, it's so sad that this electronic matter has taken the whole of our time, but just in a minute, the clause 87, which talked about mode of primary, is another very contentious one. Subsection 3 of it says the procedure for the nomination of candidates by political parties for the various elective positions will be by direct primaries, shall ensure that all aspirants are given equal opportunity of being voted for by members of the party and given opportunity to have agents for the purpose of monitoring the primaries. I don't know why, because I want us to wrap up on this note, this particular segment before we move into something else. I don't know why politicians think that because this caused a debate in a political party, that it might affect the possibility of the president assenting it. And I want us to anticipate the president's action on it. Let me begin with you, Mr. Wanko. Why do you think some people are of the opinion that this contentious clause might affect the entire bill?
No, I don't believe it's even contentious. I think that the National Assembly threw open the whole conversation around nomination of candidates or even the electoral bill. And this went to conversations, this went to discussions, and went through several processes. And National Assembly, in its wisdom, decided to choose just one method as against the two existing methods, direct and indirect primaries. And what we have seen is that there are contending forces within the political space, mostly members of the National Assembly and governors. And that contention is what is an issue. It has nothing to do with the ordinary Nigerian. The ordinary Nigerian wants to be able to participate in the nomination of candidates. When they do that, then you can get the good quality candidates. And that's what has happened. Again, like I said from the beginning, if there are people who have concerns about this, the urge is to the president that he should sign this. And like the Petroleum Industry Act, they can come back to the National Assembly and see whether they can get the National Assembly to assent to it or not.
All right. This is where we're going to wrap up this part. And that piece of document is on the president's desk. And just to wrap up in a few seconds on this one, you'll be staying with me, so don't worry. You are arrested yet again. I always do. So how critical will that, if the president, how critical will the president assent be for INEC for the implementation of the elections?
Well, presently, as the law stands today, the law states that a political party can conduct direct or indirect primaries. That is the law as of today. And the commission has monitored indirect primaries conducted by political parties and has also monitored direct primaries conducted by political parties. Now, what is critical, what is fundamental, is the fact that the legislative powers of the Federation under Section 4 resides with the National Assembly. And if you also look at Section 228 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, it gives the National Assembly the power to make laws in relation to internal democracy in political parties, especially concerning their primaries, and also states that the National Assembly can confer on the Independent National Electoral Commission additional powers relating to the issue of the primaries of political parties. So as far as the commission is concerned, any law, the moment the president assents to the bill and it becomes law, and the issue of direct primaries is now on the table, the commission will now sit down and design processes and procedures on how to monitor them.
But, what I'm asking is, how critical will the president assent be for INEC?
Well, we really will appreciate if the president can sign this particular bill as expeditiously as possible to enable us prepare the processes and procedures for the coming governorship elections in Ekiti and Osun State, and as well as the 2023 general election.
If you were to, I assume that the president is perhaps watching us right now. What would you be saying to him about the Electoral Act amendment be on its table?
I will say, please go on ahead and sign the bill so that we can enable the populace to enjoy the new system, to be able to also practice it, because what we're advocating for is one vote, one count.
All right, Mr. Wanko. You're speaking to President Buhari right now. And it's about his assent to the Electoral Act Amendment Bill.
I would love to speak to the president, but I'm going to talk about two things. One, I think that it's expedient to have this bill signed. It's urgent. And I would say to the president, you have a FEC meeting on Wednesday. That should be your occasion to sign the bill in order to build confidence for Nigerians. A second thing I would say to the president, and this is not directly related to the bill, is that tenure of some national commissioners are expiring. It's very important that we retain the experience of a whole lot of them, that the president, in appointing or reappointing national commissioners, to reappoint a lot of them who have done very well, who have the experience, and retain them within the commission, because the election is only a few months away. Where those who have done very well do not want to be reappointed, we should choose from the resident electoral commissioners, move some of them up to the National Commission, because it's important that the experience is there. This is not the time to look for neophytes commissioners to function in the Electoral Commission. There will also be vacancies at the states, resident electoral commissions at the states. This needs to happen, and they need to happen objectively, urgently. Thank you.
You're using your 1 minute to speak to the president.
You
have given him some legal and constitutional advice that we need a lot of checks being transferred to your office. Thank you so much. We're not done just yet, everyone, because the conversation continues. We're just halfway done, but we take a break, and when we come back, we get to analyze the bimodal accreditation system, BVAS, that INEC deployed in Anambra governorship election. Did it work? Did it fail? We assess that, and also for the purpose of future elections. The town hall just got started, everyone. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Thank you so much, everyone. Welcome back. Our attention will now shift to what happened in the conduct of the Anambra governorship election, which held on the 6th of November 2021. The INEC has shown interest in improving in the use of technology for our elections. It was first the card reader machine, and now the bimodal accreditation system, the BVAS. The intention is to ensure that elections are not compromised. But in Anambra State, was that agenda effectively executed? All right. We even have a wider, a more robust panel right now, larger than we had in the last hour. I have joining me now on the panel Senator Victor Ume, former national chairman of the All Progressives Grand Alliance, ABGA, and with him is Mr. Osita Chidoka, a former aviation minister and a chieftain of the People's Democratic Party. Mr. Anobi is still with us in the panel. And here also, Mr. Festus Okoye, whom I have detained right beside me. And from Lagos virtually is Mr. Agbenga Sheson, an information technology expert. I told you, robust conversation just began. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Let me begin. Some of you who monitored the event from the political or politicians' point of view. Let me begin with you, Mr. Chidoka. Did the BVAS work?
Yes, the BVAS worked. The Anambra election was particularly a good watermark for INEC because there were, it only goes to show what transpired in 2019, the capabilities that INEC had, and which many people, I remain the bellwether child of that 2019 election, whether INEC had such capabilities or not.
Or whether there was a server.
Server or no server. But
are you still convinced there is a server?
I am happy that INEC uploaded all his results on the server. But more important is the fact that before the Anambra election, INEC brought out an agent upload platform. Parties were required to upload their agent. So if two parties were to upload the same person as agents, the system rejected it. So before the election, we saw the number of agents that each party had uploaded at the polling unit level, at the ward level, at the local government level, and at the state level. So you're supposed to have 1, you're supposed to have 21, you're supposed to have 326, and then you're supposed to have 5,000 plus for the polling unit. So some parties got all, and some parties did not get all. So that automatically begins to show you how the election will go, because that transparency, that technology utilization was a very good step in what INEC is doing. Now, for the BVAS itself, INEC didn't, the BVAS is just, I went to vote, my fingerprints could not be read, they did the facial match, they matched immediately, and I voted. It was seamless for me. Many people complained about the slowness and about the issues around it, and my take was, this is what happens, when you deploy a technology without enough time for the change management system. And don't forget, we use youth corpers every time, so they are fresh, they are new. So they need to be hired much earlier than they were hired. They need to get familiar with the equipment much earlier. But the real issue in Anambra election is that he has pointed out two things, and which is what the INEC ESCO has done. By improving the transparency of elections, INEC has already removed the influence of INEC officials on the election. So instead of voting money for INEC people because they will give you result sheets or they will take it from the polling unit for you and write at the ward level, you spend the money now on voters because once it is done, it is done. So INEC is no more, INEC officials are no more as important as it used to be. So all those that were planning rigging in Anambra who relied on writing the results just found that there were no results to be written because the BVAS was telling his own story. And whatever you are doing with the agents was a waste of your time. The second most important fact for me in the election was that the BVAS handed over power to the people. So that is the major part of the reforms of elections in Nigeria, giving the power back to the people. So police did not matter. So if you waste all your money giving to police, you are wasting your time. Army did not matter because if they come and block off registration areas, the results were already online before we got to the registration areas. So there was no time to saying, oh, come back, chase everybody out and write the result. So this is a major improvement. And I must give kudos to INEC that their server is actually working.
Senator, your candidate in that election spent almost 6 hours before he could vote. For you, did the BVAS work?
Of course, yes. The BVAS worked, but not without glitches. There were difficulties in the beginning, partially because of what he pointed out. The people who were given the responsibility to operate the machine as presiding officers didn't know very much what to do when they ran into problem. What I discovered in the election was that the BVAS had a network or signal issue. If the location where the BVAS machine is has very weak signal, every effort you make to operate it will fail until some people tried to support the signal in the BVAS with personal hotspots. And you see the BVAS pick up immediately. So I traced the fault to weak signal network that was used to configure the BVAS machine. Aside from that, like my brother said, somebody has described the BVAS machine as a vaccine against rigging, anti-election rigging vaccine. But it's not just because of the BVAS, it's because of the INEC guideline as well that insisted unless the BVAS machine captures or recognizes your fingerprint or your face, that you will not vote. I think that is what saved the election. When we're using card readers, you come with your PVC. If the machine, if you come with a PVC, the smart card reader, if it fails to read your card, you have the opportunity of being given an incident form where you write your name, they take your card details, then check on the paper register. If your name is there, they will tick it. You fill the incident form and go ahead to vote. But this time around, there was no incident form. No form of accreditation was allowed except the BVAS machine recognizes you. That, to a large extent, saved the election. Because if INEC had introduced incident form again, if the BVAS machine fails to recognize you facially and with or your fingerprint, you go for form. They would have used that to manipulate the process. Anybody you brought and BVAS fails to recognize, you get an incident form, you go and vote, and the whole thing will go back to the old system. So the strict enforcement of the guideline that no incident form made it possible for only those captured or recognized by the BVAS machine were allowed to vote. It doesn't matter how many you came and failed to be recognized. So it was a beautiful exercise, and I believe that subsequently, if INEC tries to use the network providers that have very strong signals nationwide, the BVAS will be wonderful.
All right.
Yes. So
there is, before I bring in the audience members and the IT expert, let me allow Ms. Obi to weigh in. We had several conversations. You were in our studio in Anambra State, and we spoke about some of the problems. What are those things that you identified as the problems that bedeviled the BVAS at the time?
I think one of the first is the fact that we were in conversation with INEC headquarters about the voters card. The PVCs, because after the continuous voter registration for Anambra, of course it's shut down by law, by the provisions of the law that says you have to stop 60 days to the time. They were able to observe that. But the PVCs did not get to the people on time. And we were following up with INEC, we followed up with of course, our comrade, Festus.
A former comrade.
No, he's not a former comrade. We still hold him responsible, We still hold him responsible.
The former comrade is still a comrade. He's still a comrade.
So we had followed up, and we were following up because the people in Anambra said they have not gotten their voters card. And we followed up. The voters card did not get there until Tuesday. The distribution started on Tuesday, and by Thursday evening, they had to stop so that they can transfer sensitive materials. So that was a major concern for us. And going forward on that is that the severe, as is going on now, we need to move fast to ensure that by the end of next year, everybody have their cards and not wait until the last minute before they start distribution and all. That was one. The BVAS not working, we tried to follow up with INEC, and I think that is one thing, our panelists here has pointed out already, that INEC really brought out transparency, and accountability in terms of telling us exactly what is going on, because when the BVAS were not working, some of the BVAS that were not working, we raised it up, with the European Union, the team, they were in the field, and they showed us, it's like, situation room, what are you people doing about this? This is not working. And we're able to, we had a free line to INEC officials, and we're able to talk to them. They were quickly able to call on their technical officers to rectify a lot of them. And we were following up when the governor-elect, Soludo, was in a polling station and was not able to. We raised that, and he actually told us that INEC technical staff were on ground already, to rectify, and that was the report we were getting from. It took about 5 hours to do. It took quite some time. Some of it is
perhaps the longest I've seen any IT gadget being fixed.
Sheung, we were not oblivion of the problem that was happening on ground. Logistics were a major issue. We knew about so many people who down tool in the morning. Even the officers who were supposed to be, represent, who were the polling officers, the youth corpers, many of them down tooled in the morning. And the transport officers, we knew what happened that morning, that many of them did not come to work. Yeah. And again, even for us as civil society organizations, there were so many people we mobilized. They would tell you we're not going out. Because that election was very, very peaceful. But you can almost touch that negative silence.
The tension.
The tension, so a lot of people did not want to come out. I think in the morning of that day, many of us did not know that whether we were going to deploy at least those who came from outside, whether they should go out at all. But you from Channel, early in the morning already, we saw you showing that you are at the polling station already. Yeah, and a lot of people, it gave a lot of people hope. The civil society organizations was situation room. We were thinking on our feet. What can we do to encourage people to come out to vote? We had to start placing emergency, jingles. We started placing emergency jingles on all the television. We went to, Anambra State Broadcasting Corporation. We had a multitude that were able to, at least our funder allowed us, quick actions. And a lot of people, we got the thing translated into Igbo and they started, publicizing. Early in the morning, you were not seeing so many people. But as people were gaining confidence, a lot of people...
like they were waiting to see people come out.
They were waiting to see if this was real or not.
Yeah, let me bring in, because Mr. Okoye has a lot of questions to answer, but I want him to sink in all of the...
Mind you, as a lawyer, I'm the one who is supposed to ask the questions.
So I'll allow everybody to throw in their questions and their queries on this issue. Then I'll allow Mr. Okoye to respond. Of course, I'll bring it to the members of the audience. But let me bring in Benga Shason, who is an IT expert. From 2011, I think Benga and some of his friends had created a platform to mobilize people to go out and where people can report situation in elections. But Benga, it's good to see you. What do you make of the situation that happened in Anambra? That's not the first time INEC deployed the BVAS. It did in a smaller election, but it was a big stage for the BVAS. It did the job, but there were hitches. What do you think happened?
So thanks, Sheung. It's good to see you again, too. I think that one of the things that we have to admit when it comes to technology being deployed in any process is that if something goes wrong, usually it is not the technology. It can be any of 5 things or more. As has been mentioned earlier, it could be training in terms of adequate woman power or manpower and done well in advance, which is why, I know that, the, bimodal system was tested, before it was used in Anambra. And now we have Ekiti, we have Oshun, and then we're going towards 2023. So this is the time to begin to do testing. Training is being done continuously. As was said earlier, the structure of INEC, woman power, manpower, that means that people have to change from time to time. That has to be factored in so that if new people are coming in, you have to plug them into the system immediately for them to understand, the system. Testing is being done, of course, if there is any process, even not just major elections, if there's any process. And I think that this is a time that INEC can also take advantage of making sure that if there is a chance to test the system in between elections, we do focus groups and all of that for products, INEC can do the same. The other is in terms of redundancy. So there's training, there's testing, but there's redundancy. I've heard people complain about network and some devices not working and things like that. This is where redundancy comes in, where you check. INEC, I believe, has a map of all the polling units across Nigeria, and working with regulator, the NCC, and some other stakeholders, and even through their own network, they can map the structure of networks, of the strength of networks across all those locations in advance. Of course, you can begin to do that now if it's not already done. The other issue is in terms of monitoring during the process. If monitoring is not effective during the process and there is no live support, you will have a scenario where someone is trying to get accreditation and then there is a problem and you have so many hours. Within that period of time, if proper monitoring is done, you've done training, you've done testing, you've built in redundancy, then you shouldn't have a problem, because you're monitoring. You can't have 100% from day one. There is no system that is 100% from day one. You test, improve. But more important than even all of this training, testing, redundancy, and monitoring is evaluation. It will be great to hear from INEC right now. Are you crunching the numbers? Are you looking at the data? Are you considering what went wrong? And it's very easy when people say it worked or it didn't work, there were problems or there were no problems. But I think INEC needs to close its ears to either it worked or not. Take all of that feedback, but go to your numbers and check where it did not work. What exactly did not work? Was it a device problem? Was it a network problem? Was it a human problem? Because the truth is that this system and every form of technology that we introduce into the system is one step away from human intervention. Rigging is simply human intervention supported by power and additional resources. So the more we remove human intervention, the more we're able to make sure that every form of interference by politicians, by INEC officials, or by any other human agent is removed. So I'm glad that we're here having a conversation.
Quick one, Benga, and I like, we had a conversation around electronic voting. You are an IT expert, so I want to ask you two straight questions, quick one. The first is, with the internet penetration in Nigeria, Wilson Manji said that a few countries have done online voting where you can vote and instantly on the internet, you get an instant result of your vote. With internet penetration in Nigeria, are we ripe for electronic online internet voting?
The answer will depend on how we define online voting or internet voting or e-voting. If you say internet or online, you're talking about people that have connection to the internet, and that's less than 50% of Nigerians. So if we're going to combine that with other forms of voting, it's okay. But when we say e-voting, it doesn't have to be internet. Something as simple as SMS, which covers all of Nigeria, by the way, 100%, can be electronic voting. The problem at times is that when we say electronic, people want to talk about the sexy, the most expensive, the one that are brought to you by contractors. No. What we need here is appropriate technology. If in Akure, or Gusau, you are using SMS. If in Lagos or in Kano, you are using internet, you can, complement each of these things. As long as electronic is concerned, it does not have to be online.
Another question I'd like to take up with you is the issue of the BVAS. If you are to advise INEC from the complaints that we saw on the field, what would you be telling them? If they're going into Ekiti and Osun State. The biggest lesson and how to fix it.
I think the biggest lesson is the fact that, as you heard, from the political actors, everyone now knows that you can't be, a political actor and complain that somebody has influence to the BVAS system. That's not true. Technology is a leveler. ABGA, PDP, APC, any other name you have the same level of access, because what we believe is that we have an independent National Electoral Commission. And I think what we've seen in Anambra, and I believe we will see in Ekiti and Osun and other locations towards 2023, is that as we continue, INEC itself will enjoy the independence. Because to be honest, when you deploy technology tools, you feel less pressure. So I would say that one major lesson INEC should learn from this is, in the areas where failure has happened, please don't defend yourself as if nothing should go wrong. It's okay. If you have 70% today, as long as you are growing towards 100%, it's fine. Please don't defend yourself. Just say, thank you, we will look at it and fix it. That's one. Don't give excuses, fix it. The second is that where it has worked, as we love to say, bottle it and repeat it. Where it has worked, where it has been flawless, where it has had no itch at all, ask yourself what happened there. The human factor, the training factor, the redundancy factor, the monitoring factor, the evaluation factor. Repeat the same thing as you continue in elections. But I think even more importantly is that INEC needs to begin to sensitize citizens on radio, on TV, across networks that, listen, this is the future of elections. And this is how we remove, that disconnect between voting and outcome. Right now, voting and outcome can align if we begin to deploy technology tools that remove the elements of human intervention that lead to rigging. So those are the things that INEC can do as we continue.
What do we mean, Gwenga? Because I'll come back to you in a moment. Okay, quickly, yeah.
21 million people who voted without complete accreditation. Of the 31.7 million people that came out were accredited to vote, 21 million had partial accreditation or no accreditation using the card reader. So what happened with the BVAS is a tremendous improvement by changing the rules that this is compulsory. Now, what the implication of that, as he was pointing out, is lessons learned and improvement. One of the critical lessons learned is that the network failure and the delays in INEC, I don't like a situation where we have this secrecy around government operation. Somebody should pay a price for it. The IT department of INEC should hands up and tell us what transpired. You didn't measure well or you didn't train the officers. Somebody needs to carry the can. It just has to happen in this country. We should stop accepting nonsense. If something goes wrong, somebody pays a price for it. INEC should not be secretive about it. INEC should not be apologetic. Somebody is being paid for it. You told us this will work like this. It didn't work like that. What happened? Let's have a review. And let the political parties understand from the review, this is what actually happened, so that confidence is built in that process. All right.
Let me go to the audience in a moment. Mr. Okoye, you are thinking in them. You are thinking those things.
I'm listening.
Yes,
he's listening, yes.
Let me bring Bukola Idowu quickly. Let me go to, just a moment. Okay. Let me go to the audience members. Bukola Idowu, your intervention quickly.
Thank you very much. I think Gbenga Sheson was asking about what actually happened, either human or technology. I think it's a combination of human and also environment, because environmental factors also affected that BVAS. Most people did not know, because in some cases, you find difficulty in capturing the people because of inadequacy of lighting, in some polling units. So we have to also look at that. However, I think one of the lessons we need to also look at is that sizable number of people were disenfranchised in Anambra because of that BVAS that was not working. Don't forget, the election in Anambra was conducted in a very tense environment. So some people just want to get to the polling unit, cast my vote, and get back home. And then when you get there and you are being delayed, just imagine where ABGA candidate was not really in quote, a special polling unit where you have that candidate. So which means a lot of people will have gone home. and which means a lot of people also went home in that particular. So lesson learned now is that we have to hit the ground running in Ekiti and Osun. However, I think the issue here is this, and I like the way former minister and the senator talked about the power is being taken now away from the INEC officials and to the technology and to the people. Now, what does that suggest? And what should we need to build on is that do INEC need to begin to look at regular ad hoc staff trained that can be used over and over and over and over, which means, what am I trying to say is that now the people that will have worked in Ekiti and Osun can be retained to work in 2023. For instance, the people that have worked in Anambra can also work in 2023. Now, instead of the corpus changing, and so and that is where we now have the issue of training. Now, I don't think, looking at what happened in Anambra, there are issues around training. There are issues around people even coming out, having enough ad hoc staff. So some people were even deployed with half training. So to handle BVAS might be a bit difficult. So we need to begin to look into that, a pool of ad hoc staff that will have been using this thing over and over that can always be called upon.
I have a pen, Mr. Okoye. Should you want to note some of those things? Because these are very expensive advice that is coming to our head, but we need to break the conversation. I know there are comments coming from both sides of the divide, but we take a break. And when we return, the lessons on the BVAS and more. Join us again. We'll be back. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us on this special elections town hall. Let's get more reactions from the members of the audience. Madam Odi.
Okay, my name is Comrade Odi, Executive Director, Imaizazu Center for Good Governance and Accountability. I just want to say that when we discuss Anambra State governorship election of 6th November, that we should look at it from a context. Building up what happened. Even at the point, when we situation room members got Anambra on Wednesday, and the election is supposed to hold on Saturday. We interviewed so many people, even the drivers were using. The one can just stop. They say nobody is coming out. And that's when we came with the idea of the jingles. You can look at it and compare it with another election. This is different. One. And also want to address the issue of network. It wasn't about network. It wasn't about network.
The BVAS?
The BVAS was not about network.
What was it about?
When many places we visited, you will see that it's either the lightning like because when our situation members advise the INEC staff come out like this, and it start working. And also think that some of the technical staff sent do not also understand what they should do. That's what we saw. But most importantly, I want to raise another question that has been agitating our minds over. In Ihiara, no beaver problem. So what went wrong on the 6th? Because during the year, we didn't, all our observers say every polling unit monitor the beavers work. So what went wrong? We were thinking, initially we were not sure what is going on in Anambra. But most importantly, what affected the election is mainly deployment. Mainly deployment, not beavers. Beavers works in so many ways. It was few issues. What actually affected people is deployment. No personnel to deploy. And also the issue of the transport workers union. Those are the major issues. And we are thinking that going forward, the kids, INEC should be thinking outside the box, not to be resting their hope on the transport union. They should actually go and look for alternatives, like transport workers, what is it called? This good somebody in Edo, and use them because they are busy people. They will deploy, or people like Peace Transport, waiting for these people that can be compromised. A political party can just pay the money, and they will now say, "I'm not sure. I'll be safe if I go to carry your personal materials. So some of them, when they collected extra money, they still carry those personal materials.
All right.
So we need to interrogate it.
Thank you so much, Madam Modi. We'll get another comment, then I'll come back to this side of the divide. And then, okay, let me take yet another woman. Please introduce yourself. And
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chigozri Mokoro. I work under the Situation Room platform. I think we were all in Anambra and we saw what happened with regards to the functionality of BVAS. However, I must commend INEC because they were timely in certain areas that we had the challenges. You know, their technical team were timely to respond. That said, I think going forward, the way to go will be more of education, sensitization, and awareness creation. Part of what we saw in Anambra was actually ignorance. Ignorance on the part of ad hoc personnel, ignorance on the part of the citizens themselves. Just look at what happened in Anambra from the lens of what happened. Okay, if Anambrarians were not committed to ensuring that the election was peaceful, what happens? Who knows? Maybe the reverse would have been the case in the context of violence. Okay, and criminal elements taking advantage of that. And so going forward ahead of future elections, Ekiti, Oshu, 2023, there's need for us to do the right thing. So education, timely, awareness creation, timely, civil society organizations should be engaged robustly because even sitting down here, there are some things that are clearer to us as professionals. Hearing from INEC and with regards to what the whole concept of e-transmission, what it entails in its entirety. So for me, I think that is clear. And then going forward, we should do the right thing. And we should do that timely so that we won't have a repeat of these complaints.
Thank you, Chigozorim. We'll come back to the audience side of it. Yeah. Let me allow Mr. Okoye.
Can I say something?
Okay, quickly.
I just want to say that, you know, the BVAS had its own problems. But Situation Room did not wait till today to start asking INEC. We were asking questions per minute per second. You know, we're asking questions. And one of the things that came back was thousands of INEC, you know, trained personnel that were supposed to go to the polling booths down tool that morning. If you were the one, what would you have done? A lot of people were deployed without prior training. They did what that election held at all in Anambra is congratulations, not just to INEC, but to all the stakeholders. One of the unique things that I saw, which is there, you know, I think it's section 48 of the present bill, the subsection 3, had to do with inclusion. And that inclusion showed us where pregnant women, elderly, and people with disability were given priority. I think that is a plus to this election. And I thought you know, is a provision of the law, all right, but that INEC put it in their guidelines and they were able to conduct that. So I want to say congratulations. Yes, we will blame INEC where we need to blame, but when there is a human element, there is a limit to what they could have done.
Let's allow INEC. Yeah. You've just tried to allow Mr. Okoye because he's been sweating in the last week. But Senator, let me allow Mr. Okoye just a minute. Yeah. He's been sweating under his suit. Even these places, there are a lot of air conditioning working here. But Mr. Okoye, first and foremost, has the commission realized the problems with the BVAS from Anambra election?
Well, I'm going to rephrase your question. And I'm going to start.
You can't rephrase my question, Mr. Okoye. You have to answer the question. Has the commission realized the problem that came up with the BVAS? There were problems.
Yes, there were problems. We are not running away from that. And I've been listening keenly, and I've harvested some of the very useful suggestions and useful comments and inputs that have been made. But I really think that in discussing the BVAS, we must place this election in its proper context. This election was conducted under an atmosphere of heightened insecurity. That is one. Secondly, if you recall, a lot of people asked the Independent National Electoral Commission to postpone the election. And we said we couldn't postpone the election based on the provisions of Section 178 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria that circumscribed the period for the conduct of elections. The third issue, which dovetails to some of the comments that have been made here, is that when we got to Anambra, there were a lot of voice notes made by people asking hoteliers to eject people staying in their hotels, and that if they don't eject them, that something adverse was going to happen to their facilities. Not only that, we trained ad hoc staff twice. During the first training, a lot of the ad hoc staff that we trained were very, very familiar, and they were enthusiastic about using the device. But what happened? Some parents, based on agitations, based on fear, based on anxiety, withdrew their sons and daughters from Anambra State. And if some of you went to the motor park a few days before elections, you will see that the atmosphere at the motor parks was the type of atmosphere you get when people are going for Christmas holiday. Some people were leaving the state because they were not sure of what was going to happen. Coupled with that is the fact that even the transporters themselves, we had an agreement with them and they signed individual contracts with the commission. We paid them 50% of their sign-on fees. Later they came and said, no, give us 100%. We gave them 100%. Then on election day, some of them came and said we should also pay insurance fee because they were not too sure that if they deploy their vehicles, after the elections, their vehicles will not be burnt. So when we trained the second set of ad hoc staff, we thought that it was the set we trained before that were going to be there. But some of them had already declined. Some of them had opted out. Some of them, their parents came and picked them from the place. So we had to train a new set. But even after we trained the new set, even on election day, some of them did not turn up. So we had to train some of them on the spot. On the spot, yeah. And this accounts for some of the deficits you noticed in terms of the operations of the BVAS. In some of the places, there was nothing wrong with the BVAS. The only thing was that some of the ad hoc staff could not operate it. Yeah. Secondly, when we needed to intervene with our registration area technical assistants, some of the transporters had already withdrawn their vehicles on grounds of fear. So the Federal Road Safety Commission had to give us some of their vehicles. We had to mobilize vehicles from the contiguous states in order to move around our technical staff to go and fix the problem. But what we noticed was that the major issue was that some of the devices needed software update. And it was when we did that software update, that was why we didn't have any challenge during the conduct of the software.
When did you realize there was a need for
Who is responsible for checking for updates?
No, just a minute. Chidoka, you will also realize that we also conducted this election under tremendous tension. First, our offices in Idemili North and in Nnewi North were burnt. Coupled with that, our state head office was burnt. 50% of the materials we had there were burnt. Our utility vehicles were burnt. Our stores were burnt. So we had to recalibrate all these things in order to proceed with the election. And we also know that there was also a reduced working period in Anambra State. So all these things combined.
So Mr. apologies. The reason why I want apologies to cut you is you have a computer and you have a car problem. There are two different problems. The BVAS, you have logistic problem. They burned down but it is not the same problem with the BVAS software update. So when did INEC realize the devices needed software update?
No, the number of devices that needed software update was really negligible. We have conducted some preliminary research and some preliminary evaluation in relation to what happened. And we found out that in almost 95% of the places that the BVAS worked and worked very well. And that in the places where it did not work, that some of them needed software update. Why it was slightly difficult to rectify them on time was because of the transport challenges we had on account of the challenges surrounding the election. But having said that, we have by-elections to conduct. We have a by-election in Jos North Bassa Federal Constituency. We have a by-election in Cross River. We have a by-election in Ondo, and so on and so forth. We're also going to conduct some level of evaluation and then to make sure that we bring the BVAS up to date.
Because the essence of this program is to look at where they, not basically putting forth on INEC, but we wanted to help you.
Yeah.
We want our elections to work, and that's why we say improving our elections.
Exactly.
If you can give us 3 problems and what you have done to those problems since Anambra.
Well, one of the things we have done is that we have made a determination that every staff of the commission must be trained on the use of the BVAS. Yeah. So that when there's an issue, we can have a pool of interventionists, a pool of people who can intervene. Secondly, we have made a determination that we also need to look at our relationship with the National Union of Road Transport Workers because we had very serious challenges in relation to their adhering to contractual obligations during the election. But more importantly, the political parties must also assist in lowering the tension all over the country because the fact that we even conducted the supplementary elections in Ihiala was a credit to the commission because a day before that particular election, we sent a team of our ICT staff and a team of our electoral operations staff. And they were ambushed somewhere in Iseke. One of our staff is still battling for his life in one of the teaching hospitals. We had to send special forces to go and rescue them. So when some of the people who were supposed to act as supervisory presiding officers learned about this, some of them did not want to deploy. So I think that we did what we needed to do within the context, within the environment we were operating.
All right, because
but all these things, all these challenges, we are still going to review it because we have a review meeting with all our presiding officers, collation officers, and so on, to look at the whole gamut of the Anambra elections and see in what ways we can improve.
All right.
We continue to improve.
Just have at the back of your mind that anytime you are going for elections, we will call you to the town meeting like this, and you will explain yourself.
Yes.
Senator Ume.
Yes, let me just quickly add that the Honorable Commissioner doesn't need to sweat. INEC did a good job in Anambra State.
Thank you.
And the outcome of that election, you could see, got the approval rating from the citizens of the state. Again, on that date, that election was also conducted under very peaceful atmosphere. There was no harassment. No, but it's true. The security operatives did their jobs professionally. Nobody will take it away. Observers are here. That BVAS we are talking about, let nobody deceive anybody. Part of the serious challenges we had that day was signal, because the whole 326 registration areas had ICT technical support staff. In my own registration area, the technician went around the 19 polling units trying to do what you just said, updating the BVAS with a software she received. And any place she went, the machine started working, you know. And sometimes to update it takes time because you need signal to update the BVAS itself. So trying to make a BVAS machine to function optimally, she may stay there 25, 30 minutes to be able to update it with the new software. So the problem was essentially network. And if they factor it into their plans for the subsequent elections, you will see, like the man from Lagos said, there's a mapping of network coverage using different network providers. There are places, they must, where they have their masts and signal boxes will have a wider coverage. If it is a T-Salat, you configure BVAS in that area with a T-Salat. Where Airtel is very effective, you use Airtel. Where MTN is very effective, use MTN. Those things will function without.
So because we're getting to the home stretch now, but I'd like two more comments.
You passed.
Yeah.
Don't worry yourself.
I'd like two more comments from the audience. Okay, 3. So what we'll do is I like to make it very sharp and precise so that we can. Let me start with you.
Okay. Yeah. Sheon, thank you very much. Celestine Okudele Odo, ActionAid Nigeria. Thank you very much, Festus. You know, improving on the election, for me, I think it goes beyond Anambra, but repositioning for 2023. And if you look at it, logistics remain at the heart of INEC work with regards to election, you know, and logistics continue to pose challenges, you know, all the elections. So how do we look at that logistic architecture? Is this something that requires unbundling? Yeah, starting on time and look at different segments, you know, of the logistics involvement. When you talk about transportation, I think Anambra is not the first time we are having issues with regards to road transport workers. I think Kogi 2019 was still an issue. Yeah, when you even going back to Akura and others, they were still an issue. So I think it's time to really look at it, starting on time and draw up, you know, really roadmap on dealing with logistics.
Because I'm really now pressed for time. Okay, so let me take you, the man here. Please, a quick one.
All right, thank you. My name is Michael Agada. I'm a senior program officer, Yaga Africa. So my major takeaway from the commissioner's comment is the fact that it seems like the issues with the BVAS is more of a human error than a mechanical error. So I would like to remind us on the commission that Nigerians are watching, because INEC will be conducting future election under a different circumstances from Anambra. So we hope to see a situation where we will have greater functionality of the BVAS in that contest. And again, when you put in context the turnout of voters in Anambra in relation with the functionality of the BVAS, it tells you how the dysfunctional situation we had with the BVAS slowed down the electoral process at some point. And when you look at the turnout from Anambra at less than 11%, and such that INEC had to even extend the voting time at some polling unit. So it comes to tell you that should we have had, let's say, a 60% turnout, does that mean that we would have been conducting the election in 3 days?
You have actually eaten. I have only one more comment to take, and I'll allow the woman who has not spoken today before we now get the final word. And I just have about 60 seconds or so to wrap up.
Thank you, Sharon. My name is Mimido Achakpa. I'm a member of the Civil Society Situation Room. And having listened to all the conversations and comments from the panelists and the audience, my comment would be on the transportation arrangement. I know that in the past, INEC had vehicles that they would use in deploying their staff as well as materials. I remember, I think 2011 elections or 2003 elections, there were these big vehicles, Tata, and smaller vehicles as well. Wouldn't INEC consider, getting such vehicles for such operations?
All right. Yeah, we really need to go now, and our time is up. But I don't know how we're going to do it, but we have just 50 seconds for us to get our final thought. So and I'll start with you. 5 seconds. I don't know if you can do it in 10 seconds. Mr. Chidoka, beginning with you. Well, we need to speed things up.
INEC has tried, needs to improve. Election of 2023 is a very important election. It will now be 176,000 polling units. It will now be dealing with about 30 million people. So the excuses cannot wash in 2023. So improvements needs to be done. A proper review done, improvements done. And over the issue of logistics, a lot has happened in Nigeria. A lot of companies are on ground that you can actually hire and have contractual agreements with them to perform this role.
Senator Ome,
yes,
even 10 seconds if you
can. I would like INEC to keep its the determination it exhibited in Anambra, in managing the election, to be transparent. They didn't sustain it because the recruitment of ad hoc staff, particularly critical ad hoc personnel, collation officers, had been the problem over the years. But in this instance, you could see the commissioner was there on ground. The collation officers from University of Calabar were very dispassionate.
All right.
Except for one renegade that we battled in Orumba North.
If you can do 10 seconds, I'll be happy.
Security was very good, so I want to commend the Nigerian Police Force and also all the other security agencies. And for the transport owner, I will say the National Union of Road Transport Workers needs to be engaged, and the Nigerian Labour Congress. Maybe we can have a more solid foundation. Let them be seen as stakeholders, in all of the states of the Federation.
You're fast talker, Mr. Okoye.
And thank you to all of you for the short time.
Thank you so much.
Well, we will continue to improve democracy through the use of technology in the electoral process. And we'll continue to be transparent, and we'll continue to be open to Nigerians. And anytime we have difficulty, we will throw it to Nigerians, and then we get critical suggestions.
Or else we'll be summoned again to the town meeting. It's a good one,
finally,
isn't it?
Let the president sign the electoral bill.
Absolutely. We are hoping and anticipating.
Yes.
Come and sincerely thank everyone who has been able to make it today. My audience member, thank you so much. And the panelists also, thank you so much indeed for coming. And you Nigerians, wherever you may be watching, you're a real hero of our democracy. You need to come out, you need to exercise your franchise, because that is your power. And that is the end of this special town hall on elections and how to improve our electoral process. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. On behalf of Channels Television, I must sincerely thank the Civil Society Situation Room with support from UK Aid. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I'm Chion Kimale. Bye-bye.